And welcome back. So we've kind of caught our breaths after Jaco has told us what the future is going to look like, and a future energy mix that I think a lot of us can kind of relate to and say, oh, that's doable. We can get there. And then blowing us away with vehicle to grid and how EVs can actually assist the grid. And I think there's a lot of questions. I'm seeing a lot of questions coming through. I'm sure we're going to have a coffee session with Jaco afterwards just to explore that vehicle to grid concept, because a lot of people are asking a lot of questions about that. So it's great to hear and really innovative thinking. And I think his last point was, let's not try and get one massive battery bank where we can have storage, but rather have 5,000 small banks, which I think is really critical and interesting. So we're going to move on now to Jaco's brother, DeVilliers Botha. And DeVilliers is also, he's a COO and co-founder of Solareff and a director at GridCars, and he's going to talk to us about living the green lifestyle, Devon, which I think is key. It's key. Is it a distant dream, or is it actually a present reality in South Africa? And let's get down to brass tacks. Is it actually a reality for us to live? I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I'm really excited to hear what the DeVilliers has to say.
Look, I'm trying to get greener as well every day. So just like our cars, I guess we're all going to have to learn ways and means where we can make the world a better place and live it a better place for the future generations. And I'm sure DeVilliers is going to give us an excellent talk right now going forward.
Fantastic.
Can't wait to hear.
DeVilliers, are you with us, sir?
Good morning, everyone. Yes.
Morning.
Hey, how are you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you.
I'm glad we got the better looking brother second, and we've saved him for the best for last.
The old one, yeah, but you got the clever one first. Remember, so you're going to keep all the stupid or easier questions, let's put it that way, to me.
Yes.
So you're the face of the business, and he's just the engineering side of it. That's good. I'm glad we got the important guy up now.
Great.
Fantastic. DeVilliers, look, living the green lifestyle, I think it's critical. Everyone talks about it. Everyone says, is it actually possible? And I believe, you're going to talk to us about, is it a present reality that we can actually achieve? So I'm going to let myself and Devon get out the way. And take us through it, sir.
Great. I know Devon was, or is, or used to be quite a fossil fuel heavy.
Yes.
Me too, I'll agree to that. So I must say my transition started in the last 2 years or so, where since acquiring an EV, having been involved with Solareff for 10 years now, and having been a lawyer before that, having moved over to knowing how the renewables drive all of this. So it's a green lifestyle is much more about only energy and call it driving your electric vehicle. And I'm going to share about those insights with you today on what I've realized in living this way. It's a slow transition. Everyone thinks that if they speak about even the energy transition, that we're going to switch off Eskom on a day and switch on renewables on another day. That's not the case. It's going to be a transition. And even in my own lifestyle, it's been a transition, and I'd like to share a bit of that personal living ideas with you. So 2 years ago, no, it was actually a little bit more. 2.5 years ago, I was at a local discussion in the Western Cape, where Professor Hildegard Fast mentioned that in 2030, we will drive with an electric vehicle to work, which was charged by photovoltaics. And on the day, I actually went to Hildegard and I whispered in the ear and I said, you know what, we're doing it now. It's not going to be in 2030. So I'm going to share a bit of that with you later. But let's go to what we can do. Where do we start with? And I'm going to speak about me today. You guys invited me to speak about me. I'm not someone who likes speaking about myself a lot, but really to capture carbon and to make our Earth more sustainable, it really starts with me. And that's each and every one of us. Okay. So I'm going to share a few ideas on what each of you can start doing, perhaps change your thinking. You don't need to change overnight. You can transition over time. But those ideas I'll share. So what you see is there's me and my little lookalike, my little son, and smearing, call it that lifestyle off on him. how it all goes back. So what I'd like to share today first is a project drawdown details. That's a project that was started quite a few years ago by quite clever individuals. Remember, I'm not that one, so I've done the reading afterwards on them. And I got introduced to Project Drawdown at the Green Building Council South Africa conference about 2 years ago. And it's all about capturing carbon, bringing it back to Earth. And the book was published. It was edited by Paul Hawken. He actually presented at that conference. And that triggered me to start thinking around this. And what Project Drawdown is about is taking specific solutions out there, looking at the effects that they could have in, call it, greening our Earth, bringing the carbon back, making our Earth a more sustainable place to live. And then they take very detailed analysis of those and rank those systems. I'm going to share a few of them, but obviously the book is there to go look at all the detail of it. The first one I'm going to share with you is actually number 4 out of 100 in that book, and that's a plant-rich diet. So it's quite coincidental that we speak on the 1st of March today. Due to the COVID pandemic, this Congress was also postponed from last year, being on the 1st of March. But early this year, early in January actually, very similar to many people taking New Year's resolutions, I decided I'm going to have a fasting February. So taking the Daniel fast program where you will eat vegetables and water. So I allowed myself a little bit of leeway on including some lean chicken and fish in that, as again, transitioning. Don't go and throw the cart over. Take a slow transition. So I myself moved in a call it, as many people would say, a dry February. The reason I chose February was also it's the shortest month of the year. That's an important one. So I finished it on Saturday, actually. On Saturday, I decided, you know what, I've done very well this month. And to perhaps give testimony to that, I've lost 12 kilograms in this month. Now, those of you that know me, you know I come off quite a high base. So it's easy when you come off a high base to drop off that much. But if you go look at Project Drawdown, what the plant-rich diet's about is about how you could avoid those heavy red meat enterprises that really create a lot of emissions. Now, the meat industry worldwide is responsible for about 19% of CO2 emissions. And that is where plant-rich diet is number 4 in that rank. Another interesting one that many people might not think of is girl-child education. Sorry, let me just stop to give you the advice. So plant-rich diet, just think about what you eat every day. And then you could really get into that. Perhaps a little bit more fish and other meats that are less carbon intensive. But then number 6, girl-child education. And the world average of children dropping out of school is around 12 years of age. That 12-year-old would on average go and have 5.5 children. And we know we now have 7 billion people on Earth. If you could retain that girl child up to the age of 18, she would have on average 2.5 children. So we don't need to go and introduce birth controls and force people. We could actually enable them through education. And what can you and I do? You and I can go, and if we're able to, go and sponsor a girl child in a school where you could perhaps pay the school fees for a year. In that way, keeping them there. Because perhaps the reason she's not is because the parents really can't afford to keep her. There's another example, number 6. Now we get to our electric vehicles, number 26. And would you know that, or you'd be glad to know that electric vehicles is the highest transportation action that we could do. So it's the highest rank. All the others on shared mobility, all those type of things are higher, lower down. In other words, have a higher number. But number 26 is what we're doing, the electric vehicle business, and what this conference is all about. Now, thinking about what number 1 would be, let me just get my scroller right, is actually refrigeration. Just look at those ugly walls, all those air conditioners and refrigeration. You all recall the old ozone layer principles we had a few years ago, the risks of the sun actually burning us to death. The CFCs that were limited, you know what, those are still around, although the hole in the ozone has shrunk. But yes, refrigeration is still around. Remember, it uses a lot of energy. And the HFCs, which is the newer version of the coolants, still has an effect on the environment. What should you now do? How do you go about sorting out refrigeration? You know what, I don't have an air conditioner at my home though, but I've seen at guest houses, often people will run the air conditioner through the night. But you know what, at night time, we really don't need to run the air conditioner pump as such to cool down that room. You could simply set the air conditioner, if you're in a really hot area, to only run the fan, by example. By that, you will still be comfortable at a comfortable temperature, and you will run that air conditioner around 1/10 of the energy intensity. And remember, the refrigerant won't be operating. There's one idea. So you don't need to say, well, we need to go and all of a sudden sweat it out. Just perhaps change your idea on how you use your air conditioner. And do you really need it all year round? That's perhaps an idea to share. But then again, yes, we are here about more on EVs and how we travel. So I've done a bit of research on what the effect of the COVID pandemic were and the whole remote working. Now, we'll know most of us don't travel as much as we used to. In my EV alone, I did in 2019, I did 28,000 kilometers. In 2020, I only did 15,000 kilometers. In 2019, I personally did 88 flights because I commuted weekly. So it gave me 44 weeks of which I commuted by airplane from the Western Cape to Johannesburg. In 2020, I did 6 flights. Now, just think of that reduction in airplanes. So here is the World Meteorological Association also confirming that there was a difference, and that's now perhaps laying a base for us to all consider, how do we go forward? Do we really need these things? It's about really needing things in our lives, that we should just keep it in our back of our mind. Everything that we do, what's the effect of that on our environment? So I'm back with myself, where does my electricity come from? My electricity comes from the solar panels on my home, although not all of it. I am still having a grid connection, and that's the summary of what my generation at home would look like at an active state at times. So I also drive an EV, not too like Jaco, but I've at least got the i3 that I do travel with, and I focus to charge that EV as much as I could from the solar solution. So I am monitoring whenever there is a charge needed, looking at how the sun shines at my home, and then engaging that EV charger and ramping it up and down according to the available electricity. Apart from that, still, yes, my home still has the water heating, and all of that's still coming from the photovoltaic system. Now, sharing the last 30 days, now when I drew this down, it was around the 17th of February. That shows you the per day graphs of the last month. But what's interesting at the bottom, those circles you'll see, is the last year I used 70% of electricity from the renewables, from the PV system, and only 30% from the grid. Now I am getting better. That's what this actually tells you, because the last 30 days I've only been at 16% at that time. If you look at the year too, that shows you on a monthly basis. February, as I said, wasn't done yet, so at this stage it is slightly higher than it shows in this graph. But it shows you that, yes, I'm not living off-grid, but at least I'm doing 70% of renewables. Now, remember, and today I'm going to speak to EVs and how green EVs are. There is the discussions about how green photovoltaics really are, and those numbers you can plug in. But guarantee you, it is cleaner than coal. Let's put it that way. Coal is simply not clean. There are people speaking about clean coal, and even some of the previous coal people would tell you that's not so. So yes, PV, even though there are mining intensive operations to mine those things, it still is greener than using coal fuel. And this is what this graph would show you from my own lifestyle. And there's just, again, the active one where you'll see the loads. Now there you would have a geyser of about 3,000 watts. The car, I could ramp up anywhere between call it 1,000 watts up to 7,000 watts on that, on my loads, and I'll match that to whatever the sun gives me on those little yellow graphs. On the left, I also have my battery that supplies power during the night or during outages, and I have the grid. So on an active view here, you can see there's minimalistic power being drawn from the grid as such. So how do we travel? Where did we come from? It's an interesting fact that, you know what, in one lifetime, we have moved from the ox wagon all the way to the electric vehicle. And it's not, I'll give the example. Our dad, Jaco and my dad, was born in 1932. It was just around slightly to the end of the Great Depression at the time. And when he was 5 years old, so in 1937, they actually traveled by ox wagon 4 times a year to go to church because they were living far out in the farms. Our dad, and he actually passed away this day 2 years ago, but he still traveled in an EV. He moved all the way from an ox wagon through a whole fossil fuel, having driven 48 Chevys and Fords and all those nice iconic cars that we've known. And he went all the way, and he even drove an EV in the same lifetime. So can you just imagine our current 5-year-olds, what will they drive one day if we actually already driving I-Pacers, Teslas, BMW, I's, all of those. So yes, interesting times ahead on how we know technology actually evolves. So here's my own experience of charging the EV and running a bit of numbers. That's my own garage where I got a wall box charger installed, and my average consumption on my BMW i3 is 17 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So we're moving away from the old kilometers per liter principle when we've driven ICEs, and we look at our consumption on an electricity. The current municipal cost, and this is now excluding my charging from EVs, from my PV system. But if I do charge from the grid without having PV, I would pay at a prepaid rate in Mossel Bay R2.17 per kilowatt hour. And that translates to a cost of around 36.89 cents per kilometer. Now, if you compare very efficient fossil fuel cars, those of the likes that will give you around 20 liters to 100 kilometers, they will still come in around 60 to 70 cents per kilometer on the fuel cost. So yes, once you've bought this car, it is simply a dream to drive. There's a lot of power available, and it simply makes sense on a cost base. So yes, I'm speaking to the lifestyle directly. My wife and I will each morning decide who's doing the longest drive of the day, obviously given the parameters of range. We'll get to the highway shortly on how we do that range. And that person will use the EV because that's saving us money. So it's not only the green lifestyle, it's also the cost-effective lifestyle in that sense. So this is the home charging. Now, what they say, average in the world, 80% of charging happens at home. And that is what Jaco also mentioned. The opportunity lies there in having a time of use tariff, where you could say, in order to stabilize the grid, you could perhaps consider to have an EV tariff that starts from 9 o'clock at night, where the EV driver could register with his utility for that tariff and focus them or coerce them to rather charge from 9 o'clock at night and not during the evening peak, as an example, should they need it. And that's not even coming to the vehicle to grid aspect. My personal lifestyle, I'm not doing 80% home charging. I'm doing 50-50 home charging versus highway charging. So charging on the highway, this picture was taken in DeVilliers River on the N2. So having taken the data that's collected on my Charge Pocket app, which you would have seen in the video that Jaco presented earlier, versus the data I could pull from my Wallbox app, I could see that I'm evening out because of regular trips that I do to Cape Town on business, and perhaps showing you how I do drive on the highway. So I would, in the past, I would have driven 3 hours and 3/4 from Mossel Bay to Cape Town, and I would schedule, and that's with the fossil fuel cars still iced, and I would schedule my first meeting for 9 o'clock, leaving home at around 5. Since I'm driving the EV now, I'm doing that same distance in 5 1/4 hours, and I schedule my first meeting for 11. But now you say there's an hour and a half lost, but actually it's not lost, because in that time I will stop by at a convenient space where I will update my emails. I'll read a few emails, send a few mails. I'm updated on my WhatsApp. So when I get to Cape Town, I'm not a stressed out driver having chased down the highway for 4 hours. I'm quite refreshed because I have 2 nice long breaks. And that's just the lifestyle change that you will see once you start driving with an EV. So yes, doing the highways, you could say that you're going to do about 1.5 times the travel time that you would have done otherwise. Yeah, if you do a Joburg to Cape Town, don't do it in one stint. Just plan on sleeping over one night, and that's sorted. So it's not an issue anymore. Range anxiety, not an issue anymore either. So now let's get down to the green stuff. That's what we want to talk about. So I took a bit of research out of the South African market, the costs of electricity from our local utilities and Eskom, and compared that to some of the studies internationally where there's larger uptakes of EVs. And I looked at how all of those compare to determine how green that EV really is. So first of all, you need to look at the manufacturing of the vehicle. Now, the manufacturing of a vehicle, of an ICE vehicle, would be approximately 7 to 10 metric tons in the manufacturing of the vehicle, including the wheels, engine, and all the niceties to that vehicle. The electric vehicle, still having that substructure, the frame, the body, all of that, having the electric motor, that would come to about 7 to 9 metric tons, very similar. But then we add the battery, and there comes the battery. Just to manufacture the battery, remember, it's mined out of metals from the mining industry. You add that, you get a much, call it, ungreen electric vehicle compared to the ICE. Producing the fuel. So the ICE in producing petrol, diesel, whatever we're going to use in future, I think we are moving away from diesel, as we've seen in the last few years, approximately 6 metric tons. Just as perspective, the assumption here is that you would do 220,000 kilometers of lifetime of these vehicles, right? If you then look at the electric vehicle, if you charge your electric vehicle from 100% renewables, either wind or PV, that fuel would only be 2 metric tons. And if you charge it from the Eskom grid, 23 metric tons. So again here, the EV is the big loser. And then we get down to driving the car. When you drive the ICE, you are emitting the CO2s coming out of your exhaust pipe of 37 metric tons, whilst on the electric vehicle, 0. And believe you me, the vehicles, the electric vehicles, has temperature sensors on the batteries and so on. And the electric vehicle, the hottest item would be the battery. Because remember, you will have regenerative braking, which charges the battery again. So you're not using your brake discs, where on an ICE, you would really transfer all that kinetic energy into heat in your brakes when you slow down. You would actually, in the EV, put it back into the battery. So that is really, truly the fact that the EV does not have all those byproducts coming out of it as such. So what is the summary if we total it all up? Tally it, as they say on the Survivor program. So yes, your ICE, around 49 metric tons. Your EV, if you charge from renewables, 20. There's the winner for now. And then from Eskom, 41. So that shows us that it is still greener to buy an EV and drive an EV, but perhaps not by the margin that most of you would have thought or might have been told by some people out there that it is super green to drive an EV. But in fact, it is green. And remember, these cars have, if you haven't driven it, you better go do that. It is interesting how those instantaneous power just is put down onto the road. It's nippy. It is, yeah, it's actually nice to drive. It's enjoyable too. So the greenie question: what's going to happen to the batteries after we've driven this car? And here we've got the Rivian EV pickup that hasn't sold 1 unit yet. They've been in development. You might know, you might have read about the Amazon deal, where Rivian is actually going to build quite a few Amazon delivery vehicles. But what Rivian has done in the whole development of their car, they've already thought of how are they going to remodel their batteries at the end of the lifetime. Because remember, the battery over age would lose some of its capacity. And on an EV, what the effect is that you're going to lose range. So where you would have, for instance, in the case of the Rivian perhaps, have had, and I haven't driven it, and there's a dream for all of us to still drive that, but the Rivian says they will have a 500-mile range when new. And once that range deteriorates over time, as you've used your EV to about 300 miles, you would want to throw out your battery. So Rivian has already planned what to do with that battery, and they've planned their batteries to then become what we can call second life stationary batteries for purposes of installing them in buildings, residences, wherever you'd like to still repurpose them. So what you'll be sold then would be on the balance of that battery, on the kilowatt hours available in that battery. That's what you'll be sold for a stationary application. In other words, doubling the life that you would have had out of the battery. So immediately already a green solution. It's not just a once-off use. There is a twice-off use at least. Then on the recycling part, there is already a lot of recycling being done and studies being done on the recycling of the metals contained in these batteries, being mostly copper, nickel, cobalt, which were coincidentally those that were mined, if we just think a few slides back. And then again, the lithium, there's big developments in the lithium recapture. Now, lithium, the batteries are mostly called lithium ion, but it's not because lithium is the biggest concentration of one single item in these batteries, it's because it is the active ingredient and what actually moves in the battery. So those heavy metals that I've mentioned, they are actually the ones that would usually be the heavy metals that gets recycled out of these batteries. So yes, our takeaways, and I'm getting back to my green lifestyle and perhaps a little bit of the eating habits. So it's not McDonald's or Nando's, is it starts with you. You should make the decision, am I going to start changing? You don't need to do something drastic, but change your mindset. Go and drive an EV if you haven't just driven one. You'll be surprised. Live and have eat a bit more plant-rich. Let's put it that. Think of nature when you throw out fresh water. Can't you perhaps repurpose that water? That's important. We haven't even gone to water today. And love each other. Don't just live for yourself. Think of your neighbor. Think of your kids and their kids to come. And be effective. This is what it should be, as I've said with the water principle. And then, consider your EV. And this is a quote of yours truly, coming back to me again, of 2 years ago, and I decided to now active use that, is to say disruption is only disruptive to those that are slow to embrace change. So, yes, I am an embracer of change, and you're all welcome to engage with me as not being the engineer in this mix. And I will give you the day-to-day stuff. And some of you have engaged with me in the past. Let's engage again and speak about things we can do to change our earth and make it a better place to live.
Oh, I think that's awesome, DeVilliers. I mean, I think you're speaking around each of us being the change. And I think it's so easy for people to say, oh yeah, they must do something, or Eskom must do something, or these guys must do something, or everyone else must do something. But if we all as individuals just do a little bit of something, we make a massive difference. So I think that's great. And I believe you've got a video to share with us around the green lifestyle, if I'm correct. I don't know if we can go to that and we can have a look at that video. And once we come back, I've got a flurry of questions again for you, for people asking about truly living the green lifestyle.
Yeah.
So, DeVilliers, let's talk about the green lifestyle. We got a couple of minutes still with you. I've had a lot of questions of guys coming through who signed into our registration. And I think the first one, which I've seen repeated a lot of times, is what is the real ROI with a solar system on my house? I mean, what is the real return on investment? I mean, obviously, once I plug an EV in, it changes, but the reality for most of us right now, what kind of ROI am I looking at with a solar installation on my domestic house?
All right. I think what we look at, and there's a different way. ROI is always the difficult one because there's how can I say, each person will have a different view on what they would see as an acceptable return on investment. In other words, what do I get for my money?
Yeah.
We know low interest rates. We're not earning much on having money in the bank. So the way we see solar systems, call it payback as some people would say, is rather to use what we call levelized cost of energy, LCOE, the acronym for that. And in that sense, you take the lifetime power generation of the system and you divide the costs of the system by that generation in kilowatt hours, and you get to a tariff that you find at the start, and it brings it back to a tariff as at today. So when you look at your larger scale shopping mall systems, and one like the one behind me and so on, that could range anywhere between 40 to 70 cents. When you get to a residential system, yes, you now have that expensive battery. You have the intelligent inverting capacity with reverse flow of power through those inverters. So the system cost is much higher. But what we've seen, you could work on an LCOE of anywhere between, and that depends on the scale of the system, between about a R1.50 to R1.70 up to around R3. And that is essentially where you then plug it in. And remember now, the battery technology, the lithium technology, is not that you only have a 3-year lifetime battery. Those batteries have a 10-year warranty on them. But as I perhaps on that screen that I showed earlier, you have that management screen where you can see the depth of discharge of your battery. So the warranties work that you really discharge that battery right to a 10%, which a lithium battery can handle, and recharge it again for the next cycle. So they would guarantee a certain amount of cycles. Where if you then manage your battery properly, your battery will easily last 15 years. And having tested that on my EV, I've trained that Red BMW's power very low in the past. And the battery life is where it was when I bought the car more than 2 years.
Yeah.
Yes, so with the LCOE, and then what you do is you compare that number to what you pay to the grid. And what I always say is, if your LCOE is cheaper than what you pay to the grid, which my current grid sits at R2.17, my LCOE at home came to R2.08. So it makes sense today for me to build a solar system with a battery to power my home and charge my car. If you were at a much cheaper tariff to council, then you wait a bit for your council tariff or Eskom tariff to catch up with that also.
Sure. Okay. I think that simplifies a very complex discussion and makes it easy to understand.
Yes.
Devon, I know you've got a couple of.
I've got plenty. I've got plenty. To bring it back to cars and reselling of cars, I'm a car salesman by at heart and by trade, and I want your thoughts, please, DeVilliers, on on the idea of selling into car hire companies. In my opinion, they've got the budget, they've got the pockets, they can afford these electric cars for now as an upfront brand new purchase, right? So we can get the volumes through there. I'm coming from a space of how do I get as much electric cars into our market as possible? Who can afford it? So now we have a channel to get cars into the market. And then after they use the cars, then they sell those cars through the used car departments, and then average Joe in the street can actually afford that used car. And I just wanted your thoughts in terms of how do you see us increasing EV sales as quickly as possible? And and are there any other potential channels, in your mind?
I've got many thoughts on that for you. So I'm gonna start, but I think you're gonna have more cleverer people, as they say, that's going to speak to perhaps the whole tax, the ad valorem taxes and all those principles, and the customs duties on these electric vehicles coming in. I did a comparison on using the iPace as the comparative figure because the BMW does have local manufacturing in South Africa. So the iPace does not have that, call it local manufacturing, doesn't get those incentives. In the US, an iPace would cost you $70,000 and you get a $7,500, depending on which state you are, you get a $7,500 rebate. Then in South Africa, we have the 25% tax on top of it. So we pay on average for an iPace in South Africa around 1.8 million, but in the States, you would pay 950,000 rand. So yes, perhaps the taxes on that would help. And if we then can work with government to work towards explaining to them that it's going to be beneficial to the country and the grid to reduce those, you will have a volume up. Then also we know just last week there was a publication that there's, call it VW, having developed the ID4 and the ID2. They mentioned, ID3, they said there might be an ID1 coming out, which will be a Polo-sized electric vehicle, which could again perhaps be the future people's car. I think that's what, and as we all know, with volumes, the pricing also comes. I think Jaco also, you will remember, shared those graphs that shows you the reduction in battery costs, the reduction in PV costs. That all comes with volume. It is a new technology now, but in future it will come. So through working together, industry and government, we could really stimulate the uptake of more EVs into the country.
Fantastic. So I suppose, DeVilliers, I'm going to go off that question, and I'm going to bounce on off you. What we're talking about here is really the green economy. And South Africa, I mean, we're sitting with the official unemployment states, anything between 35 and 45%. You know, unemployment's a massive challenge if we localize it. We talk about South African solutions in South Africa. What do you see as the job creation opportunities within this green economy? I mean, everyone's talking about the green economy is going to take so many jobs away from traditional sectors, but I know someone in your position and your kind of insight will actually counter that with saying, but there's a huge amount of job opportunities that come from the green economy. What insights can you share with us on that?
Great. I don't want to go into my whole regulatory hat that I wear in the renewable energy sector. There's a lot of data I can share you from there and keep you busy a long time. But one of those principles, as I mentioned earlier, was that you could migrate, from an ISCOM into your renewables. Just think of that. You're going to have, currently you have a centralized generator capacity in the Mpumalanga region for that matter. Now all that will become a distributed network in future, similar to what Jaco shared with you on that grid of the future. So you're going to have jobs created in the local municipalities where that consumption is happening, building those plants there. Now, we know also that one of the important principles is that government presses on renewables for local content. And then in the local content, the focus is very much on manufacturing. But what we should just remember, if we look at those factories manufacturing batteries, manufacturing PV panels, car manufacturing for that matter, there's a lot of mechanization in there. Okay. So we need to go down to say, where is jobs going to be? And what we see, what I see also, and what we see is to say, look at the installation side. If we build projects and maintain projects in local areas, we're going to keep our children staying at their homes where they were used to staying, and they're actually going to have jobs there. They won't have to migrate to the big metros also to go and find a job one day. They will actually get those jobs created in those areas. One threat that I've seen, and that's what I've seen, and I'll give it as my personal opinion there, is that in South Africa, we should also not be slow to migrate our vehicle manufacturing base into EVs. Okay. And the likes of NAMSA would be the instigators in driving that. So what we've seen is that we haven't seen one of the large OEMs already now manufacturing full BEVs, battery EVs in South Africa. I believe Mercedes-Benz is building the plug-in hybrid C-Class in East London. But what has happened is that in Africa, Ghana and Kenya has now got full-blown EV manufacturing plants, which they didn't have a vehicle industry or vehicle manufacturing industry before. And it's one of those, again, that we should be careful as South Africans not to be left behind that.
Sure. So I think DeVilliers, it's you know what you've mentioned is really important. You know, we can't afford to be left behind.
Yeah.
We need to get this moving. And maybe in closing, we've got one question that I think most of our speakers have answered. If you 60 seconds, DeVilliers Botha, what's the one thing that you would change in South Africa today to see a faster EV uptake and transition to green mobility within the next 12 months? So what's the one thing you're looking for?
Can I give two?
You can get two quick ones if you fire them fast.
The one is, as I mentioned, perhaps a tariff. As I showed you, it's already cheap to charge your EV. But if you make it even cheaper, people will buy them more, people will enable to charge them. And the second one is the tax base of EVs. Perhaps build the tax over time so that you could earn the tax as a fiscus over time rather than having it up front. Because the current barrier could be the upfront cost.
Brilliant. So we're looking at tariffs and we're looking at the taxes. And as you say, if we make it cheaper and more affordable, more people are going to do it. And I think that's really the future, and that's where we sum it up. So yeah, from myself, DeVilliers, it's been an absolute pleasure hearing somebody who actually realistically lives the green lifestyle. I mean, you're not, dare I say, with respect, you're not a hippie out there with recycled clothes on. You're
I'm not a hippie with the VW bus. Yes.
No, 100%. And you've been honest. You're saying 70% of your power comes from solar, but you know that some of it is on the grid. And I think that to me is really refreshing. It's an honest take on, you know, you're not saying to everyone, oh, unplug everything and live off the grid completely, and I don't know, use your own waste to power your house. I mean, it's completely unrealistic. What you're saying is, here's a realistic solution where you can do a little bit, and a lot of little bits adds up to a big change. So
yes.
I think that's inspired me personally. I think it's been great. Devon, any closing thoughts from your side?
Yeah, absolutely. And one step at a time, and we get more efficient each and every day, and we look at different areas of our lives, and we get to a stage where we look back and we say, wow, big difference.
100%. And I think DeVilliers, there's people like yourself and what you guys are doing there at Solareff, which is leading the way. And I think it's exciting, and it's a privilege for us in South Africa, knowing that we've got people like you on board who are driving the change and looking for the solution. So it's been an absolute pleasure, sir. Thank you for joining us and taking some time out of your busy day on the 1st of March to spend some time and talk to us and share some insight about living a real green lifestyle.
Thanks a lot to you guys, and it's always honor. We'll be honored to also be part of that.
Fantastic. DeVilliers, thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure having you here, sir. So we're going to go on a quick tea break. I think everyone needs to just kind of absorb what's just been presented to them. You know, look at themselves and say, what can I do in my own personal capacity?
Yes.
And we'll be back in about 10 minutes. And then we've got an international speaker, a gentleman called Pat Wheeler, who is talking on enabling technologies for the transportation electrification. Now this is a big topic. This is something that I think a lot of people really want to talk about, because this is where we can see big changes. And I think if you listen to one talk today, this is probably the one that you're going to want to talk to.
Okay.
Pat has a long title. He's a professor of a million things. He's joining us all the way from the UK, and it's a real privilege for us to have him on board. So for everyone who's watching, go and have a quick tea break, go and get yourself a cup of coffee, and we'll see you in 10 minutes time when we talk with Professor Pat Wheeler. For myself, Rob and Devon, enjoy your tea break, guys.
See you soon.
See you soon. Thank you.